Hello. The session deals with Java database connectivity. For any Java application, a database is important which serves as a backend. We will now see how there is a connection that is established between the application and the database. For here, we need a Java database driver, that is JDBC API, which is connected with the Java application. And not only that, we need a driver for the particular database that we are going to choose. It may be either Oracle, SQL, Access, Sybase or DBase, anything of any kind. And this is the basic concept. Here the Java application is connected with the JDBC API. This serves as a source for connecting between the application and the backend, where the application can retrieve or store the data in the database. And here, through this JDBC API, there are the drivers for that is connected to the respective database. There are different types of drivers. We'll just have a look at what they are. It is JDBC ODBC bridge, native API partly Java driver, JDBC net pure Java driver, native protocol pure Java driver. Just we can have a note of all these. In the next step, we will just see what are the steps that are required to establish the connection. So basically, there are 3-4 steps. First, we need to install the driver and load the driver. Since this is a database driver, it will already be installed with the system. So we need to just load the driver. For loading the driver, we will have certain statements written in the code. Next step is to connect to the database. And third step is performing the operations, that is creating and executing the JDBC statements. And the final thing is handling the SQL exceptions if anything is going to be raised. And before going into the code, we will just take a look at what are the methods that are required to access the values from with the database. Here, for execute is the method that is used for DDL queries. DDL queries are basically create and altering the table such queries. Execute update is a query is a method that is used for DML queries. DML queries will include inserting into the table, updating the table and deleting the table. And the last one is execute query. In this, this is used for DQL queries. DQL queries are generally selecting from the table. Now we will see about the code that we need for accessing the values from the database. Here we need to import the SQL package. We do this because there may be some SQL exceptions that will arise, which can be handled with the respective method. So for that we need the SQL package, and we have a class named database DB, public static void main. We need it because this is a single method which is invoked without an object. So that is why you have static. And the 3 statements that are very important for creating and establishing a connection are these 3, where class.forName. ForName is the method that is used for loading the driver, and sun.jdbc.odbc, JDBC ODBC driver is the driver that we use for connection. The next statement is establishing connection. Driver manager is a class. With this class, we invoke the method getConnection, and this is JDBC ODBC test. Here, this test is the data source name. we will see what data source name is. Here we do not use the actual database name. We map it into a name called as data source name. We will see how we do that now. Go to control panel. Here under control panel, select system and security. Under here, and here you choose administrative tools. In here you find something called data sources ODBC. Choose that. Here click add. Here is where you have to choose the driver for which we want to set up the data source. Our file is a Microsoft Access database, and hence a file that is stored, a database that is stored in that format will be a .mdb or .accdb extension. So choose that and click finish. Here you need to give the data source name. It can be anything. I had it as test. Let us replace it as test1. And we need to select the database. So say select. And my database is in the driver E. Under Durga, choose the folder where our database is. So this is a database for which the mapped name is test1. Say OK. And then say OK. OK. And that's how our database is mapped with a data source name. So coming back to the code, you need to change this as test1 and I save it. The third statement, important statement, is con.create statement. This is where we start with creating a database. Okay. Now we have a set of statements with execute query. This is our methods that we have for DQL commands, and all this we will see step by step. First we will see by creating a database, a table. We already have a database. We will create a table. I just comment these 3 lines and have just this line uncommented. So we have just this execute create table, some table name. I change it as defi table 1, account number, account name and amount. This is simply a table that holds the values of an account number, account name and amount. Let's see what happens. Open the command prompt. Say java c db.java. Here the compilation process is done and we get a class file generated. So it takes a few minutes or few seconds maybe. It's done. So we now interpret it. Java DB. Once this is done, we now open the database. Just click all tables. Close all this. here is our table, defi table 1. This is what is the table that we created now. Now let us see how we can insert values into this. Here, these statements, I will release the comments. So if you see, it says st and one important thing is connection, statement and result set are interfaces. All these three will have certain objects. With that objects only, we will call the methods execute update, execute and execute query. Now that's why we have st.execute update. Here, now insert into defi table 1 values. I have given few values and I save it to check how many values are inserted. Now I give javacdb.java to compile and I give javadb to interpret. It says there is an SQL exception where defi table already exists. This comes so because when these 4 statements are executed, it means the table is created again, and hence say when the same table exists, there exists a conflict. So I comment that line, I save it, and now let us try to compile, to interpret. Job is done. Now open the database to see if your values are inserted. If you see, the values have been inserted. The values that we have given here has been reflected in these table. Okay, now let us see how we can retrieve these values from the database. So for that, I release this comment and I comment these lines. So the operation is just going to be retrieval of values, and I have used a while loop here to retrieve the value from the database and print it on the screen in the command prompt. For this, I have a method called getInt to retrieve integer value and getString to get a string value. I have this 1, 2, 3 in order to specify that the value is coming from the first column, the value is coming from the second column, and the value is coming from the third column. That's all. So let us see how it has been executed. Compiling. So the values, you see there are a lot of values here, and that is not the table that which we created, and hence we need to change the table name here, defi table 1. So now let us check. It will be just 3 values from the database. Hence, this is what is happening between the database and the application. Thank you.